they finally rewrote the entire Outlook synchronization engine. And if you care, they were actually licensing a product called IntelliSync, which was a Nokia application. So they were licensing that, and the Nokia engine was actually the engine that synchronized your calendar and tasks between Outlook and Saleslogix. Well, that is a very old piece of technology, somewhere around 10, 15 years old, definitely was showing its age. And so what they've done is they got rid of it, which is great. They rewrote now natively an SData-based integration, which is pretty spectacular because it's near real time and it has some push technologies in it. So a lot of the synchronizing that's happening literally happens as fast as you're creating something in Outlook or Saleslogix. It just moves and shows up in both places. You can also set it on an interval, a timed interval, and I'll show you how to set some of that up. So far, from my experience, it's been pretty impressive. It really seems to be rock solid. So hopefully that bears out for those of you that start using it and really depending on it. Now, the other thing that they brought into this release, which I don't have in my beta version, but it is in the release version, is they've really stepped up their game as far as the social experience within Saleslogix. Now, there's a little screenshot of that here. And so there's going to be a tab at a contact and a lead and an account record for that matter. You can actually subscribe to your contacts records, LinkedIn, and Twitter feeds. And there's a tab for that now that's new that's going to present a chronological listing of all of the latest social postings from your contacts. And those can be based on not only the contact themselves, but on key hashtags. So you can actually ask it to scour LinkedIn and Twitter for particular hashtags, and upon a match, it builds this listing of records in those systems. So you can also post updates in there. So it's really, to me, as good as anything I've ever seen, in a CRM system. This is definitely something that Saleslogix has been knocked a little bit on, not really up to speed with social interacting and so forth. That is no longer the case with 8.1, and so this whole social experience is part of the native release. And then the other thing that they've added, which is really good because they sorely needed this feature, and it's the multi-attendee capability. In all previous versions of Saleslogix, if you scheduled an activity, a meeting, a phone call, a to-do, you had to link it to one contact in the database, and that was your option, either one lead or one contact. But in the business-to-business world, very often, many different contacts are being asked to attend the same meeting or are part of the same activity. And so I'm going to show you that throughout 8.1, you now have a participants tab that allows you to create or link multiple contacts or multiple leads to a single activity. And they really did a nice job. There's a lot of different ways to kind of skin that cat. And I think the way they did it really makes a lot of sense to me and is really going to be a useful feature, and we'll show you that. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the new Saleslogix data embedded in Outlook. And part of that, too, and I think this is by far the coolest feature that you're going to see in 8.1, is an adaptive Outlook client. And what it's doing is, I apologize, this is the only screenshot I have of it, but inside of Outlook, in addition to the send SLX and synchronize SLX buttons, they actually give you the ability to add a little mini version of Saleslogix over here on the right-hand side of your screen. So what's happening is, if you highlight an email in your inbox, your saved box, or whatever it is, it automatically brings up a little skeleton or thumbnail view of that contact record and that contact record's related data. So here we've got an email highlighted down here at the bottom, John Abbott, found John in the database, so it looked him up by email, and it presents you in this panel, this adaptive client, his information, his company, his phone number, how many unread emails he's got and the sales potential for any opportunities he's part of, any campaigns he's responded to, and some other kind of KPI information that you can see here. And these are also navigationable. I don't even know if that's a word, but you can actually go to his record because these buttons and little components here are interactive. So saves a lot of lookups and saves a lot of time having to bounce back and forth between Outlook and Saleslogix, because perhaps exactly what you need to know to respond, you're looking at it right here on the screen, or maybe you need to pick up the phone and call them. So this is very exciting, and it's something our competition has had for a while. We've now got it, and you have it. So if you move to 8.1, you can have this thing as well. There's no additional cost for it as far as I know. Okay, so let's jump over to Outlook here, because I do have the new integration engine installed in my Outlook. And so the icons have changed a little bit, and the Record to History button is over here next to the Sync Now button. And the Sync Now button would be used if you don't want to wait for your timed interval to come and go. I've got it set to a minute, so that's pretty quick. So things are going to synchronize between Outlook and Saleslogix every minute. But the other thing I like that they did is they got rid of all the configuration. It used to be that you had to configure your email integration in one little app and then your calendar sync in another little app. So they've now put that all together under this single options panel right inside of Outlook. And so as you can see, as you could in the past, you can synchronize contacts based on a group of records in Saleslogix. You can choose the folder in Outlook that you want the synced contact records to go to, and you can also do things like two-way versus one-way. Same with appointments. You can choose the calendar folder that you want your synced appointments to go to if you manage more than one calendar, and same with the tasks. And down here is where you can choose the interval at which it automatically synchronizes those items for you. And then the next is when you're recording an email from Outlook into Saleslogix, you do have some of these parameters that allow you to choose whether it pops up a task tray notification, or if you don't really want to see those things, you can just hide it and just sort of secretly does it in the background without disturbing you. So you can control that as a user. The other thing I like about it, which really has been a pain to me, a lot of emails now have little graphics files and logos and hyperlinks and stuff in them. Every one of those was treated as an attachment, and so when you were linking emails, you've got 50 copies of the guy's logo in your attachments folder. So now you can strip that out. So you can define what kinds of file formats, which are attachments and emails now, you don't want it bringing into Saleslogix. So the attachments still work, so if it's not a JPEG or a GIF, it's still going to attach those files to the email history, but it's going to ignore any files that are part of the email that are either a certain size and are a certain file type, which is great for keeping your attachments tab clean of all this junk. Okay, so the other thing that they've added back in that the LAN client has had, the web client didn't, Outlook now honors the Saleslogix address books. So if you're creating an email in Outlook, you don't have to copy and paste from Saleslogix if you want to include other contacts or other Saleslogix users in an email. You actually have the ability now to query the address books that it creates inside of Outlook, which can include groups, leads, accounts, and opportunities. And I'll show you that here shortly. And then there's some logging options too. So if you're getting an error, I haven't gotten any yet, but if you are getting an error, you can turn on error logging to try to help you understand what might be going wrong. So let's try that. So the first thing you'll see is that if I create a new email in here, I do have the ability to bring up the library, which is the other thing. Why don't I see it now? So you can also, yeah, the library is in here too. Not sure why I didn't get it in this view. Here we go. So the Saleslogix library is also now part of the web Outlook integration. So if you're using the library to store common documents, the library that's in Saleslogix is now available in Outlook to include as attached files for outgoing emails. Very cool. I was sorry that that wasn't in the web client, kind of missed it. Well, now it's back, so I think that's very cool. And then if we try to address an email here, clicking on the To button, this is where you're going to see other address books. And so here's where you're seeing your Saleslogix contacts groups. If you want to send a group email, you can now do that from right inside of Outlook. And it also pulls in your lead groups, your account groups. I had everything checked on, so you're kind of seeing it all here. Here's all my opportunities, so any contacts that are part of an opportunity group. And then also my Saleslogix users. So if I want to include other Saleslogix users, they're also listed in here as addressable recipients of this particular email. So pretty cool stuff. That closes the gap on one of the things that the LAN client did better than the web, and so now they've kind of got it all caught up, and I think they are pretty much dead even now. Okay, so let's take a look at the next thing we want to show you. And as I mentioned, the Outlook integration engine, for those who care, is all based on SData now, which is Saleslogix's proprietary web services. So it's all happening through web services. You do not have to have an internet connection for this to work, because what will happen is if you're using like a laptop and you're offline, you can click the Send Saleslogix button, and even though it won't save the history at that moment, it actually stores up all these requests. And once you are reconnected to Saleslogix, it'll go ahead and process all of the stored history items that you asked it to using this SData capability. Okay, this is a little bit more information about the social media, Twitter and LinkedIn currently. I think there are more social media engines coming. These certainly are the two biggies in the business world. And so with this new tab we talked about, you'll be able to do hashtag searches, search terms, take action on what you find, like retweet right from the screen if you wanted to, or respond to a LinkedIn posting that somebody might have put on there. Pretty neat stuff. They really did a nice job with this. Okay, the next one I want to show you is multi-attendees per activity. And as I mentioned, no longer can you just invite one guy or girl to a meeting. You can invite as many as you want. And again, they did a really nice job of this. Again, there's a number of ways it could have been done, but I think the way they did it really makes a lot of sense to me. So let's look at 8.1 here. The first thing you may notice is they rebranded it. They got rid of all the references to Sage, since Saleslogix is now a standalone company, no longer part of the Sage umbrella. So they're very proud of that, and they've gotten rid of all references to Sage in the interface. They got away from the kind of the green and the teal coloring scheme too. And they've adopted this more, what I kind of call a flat look to it, without so much shading and gradations, which kind of slowed the browser down because it was a lot of overhead to load all those colors and shades and whatnot. So now it's a lot cleaner looking interface to me anyway. I really like it without all the fluff and graphics. So it's certainly familiar to you. The organizational layout of everything is just as it always was, but a nice new, fresh, and modern look to it. Some of the other things they changed here while I'm thinking about it is they changed some of the screens where you can move a contact record to another account. So if they change jobs, John Abbott got a job somewhere else, they redesigned the move contact screens, gave you more options here on what you did with the data that was at his old record. They allow you to reassign things individually now instead of all things going to the same other contact. So they re-engineered this and really kind of completed it and made it very, very nice. But again, what I wanted to show you here was if we go to activities now, and so these are scheduled activities, and if we look at this particular meeting, I just have it called test so we can find it easy. So we bring up this scheduled meeting, and what's new is this participants tab. So as you can see, John Abbott, the contact we're on, he's the primary. And so the first contact you add is always the primary, but you can change the primary to somebody else. So there's always a primary record. Now, what you'll also see in here is that we've got Chuck and Mike. Now, Mike is a contact linked to Abbott Limit, but Chuck is not. So I can actually invite contacts at a different account into the same meeting. Maybe Chuck is a consultant or a hired gun employee or something like that. And the way you add those is there's really 3 different ways you can add these participants. One of them is you can do a lead lookup, and this is a pretty standard lookup like you see throughout Saleslogix, and you can do some filters on how the lookup is going to perform. Nothing really changed here. So that's if I want to invite a lead. So I can span outside of the contacts table and go right to the leads table, or I can go to the contacts table. And in this case, it's presenting me with a list of contacts that are linked to Abbott. So this is not all the contacts in the database. This is just the Abbott ones, okay? So that makes it very easy to add other people who work at Abbott. But the really cool one is this wildcard search. So I may want to invite somebody who's not part of Abbott, and or I don't know if they're a lead, I don't know if they're a contact, but I know his name is Tom. So I type in Tom and search, and it shows me Tom as a contact at Columbus, America as a contact. But then it also found a couple of leads named Tom. So from here now, I can continue to build out my participants list and pick and choose who else I want to add to this particular meeting. But the other thing that I really like is that you can assign a role. Well, what's his function going to be at the meeting? Is he the decision maker? So this is a pick list, and you can define this in the pick list editor. Well, what's Chuck's job or role or function at the meeting? So you can build out these relationships for what these people are supposed to be doing here. And then this is attendee. That allows you to record whether they actually attended or not. So he may be invited and included, but this gives you a way in the data to select he did or didn't attend the particular meeting, even though he was invited. Again, I think this is all really great stuff. Now, how or what is it doing under the hood? It's actually creating multiple rows in the activity table. So for every attendee, you're going to see a separate activity record at each of their, either their lead record or their account record. So we see this test one here at Abbott Limited, and that represents all the attendees of that meeting. And you saw me edit it there. But that same activity is going to show up at Chuck, I think, and Tom. It's going to show up on their activity tab too in the related account if they're an account. And then also when you complete the activity, it creates a separate history record for each one of the invited contacts or leads. Now, that may sound confusing, but you can complete the activity at any one of those people. And because the way the Saleslogix engine is working under the hood, it's managing the linking of that activity, and it knows it's all the same meeting. Even though it was 4 people, it's the same meeting, and even though they each have a row in the database representing the meeting for them, it maintains the linkage. So when you create the history and complete the activity for one of the guys, it will complete it for all of the guys and create 4 history records at their appropriate account. Likewise, if you edit this meeting, it's going to propagate that change through all the linked activities. Again, I really think they did it right, and it works exactly the way I would hope that it would. Okay, now we did a webinar about Mobile 3.1 was last month, and there's a video of that if you missed it, but certainly Mobile 3.0, and there's actually another rev coming out, 3.01 or 2, I think, coming too. We'll talk about that a little bit, and there's even more functions coming. Saleslogix has really hit the gas as far as cranking out new code, new features, and new functions. I've seen more new stuff in the last 3 months, I think, than I have in the last 5 years, which is all good. So they've also improved the dashboarding. I'm not going to talk about that too much because a lot of this is part of 8.0, and we covered some of this in 8.0. But the other piece of it I want to talk about is the reporting engine. And let me get to that here. They did rewrite the way Saleslogix functions with Crystal reports. So what they set out to do was solve an issue with long-running reports. And I'm in a demo database, so generally if I run reports in the demo, it only takes a few seconds and the report comes up. But I don't have a lot of data in here. Some of our customers have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even millions of records in their database. So if you run a report that incorporates, a million contacts, it can take several hours to assemble a big old report. Now, in the past, in previous versions, that required the Crystal web viewer on your workstation to run and actually do all the processing of that report. The downside is it monopolized your machine. So it consumed most of all of the resources. You really couldn't do anything else on your computer while a report was running and being generated in the background. They recognize that as an issue, and they've kind of overhauled that mechanism in here. So now when you run reports, those are actually running on the server itself, and there's actually a service called the job server running on your server. And the job server itself is actually doing all the computing and processing and assembling of the report. And then what it does is pretty cool, because what you can do is you can right-click on a report and tell it to run the report right now, or you can schedule it, because maybe you don't need it now, but you want it to run every day because, at the end of every day, the manager wants to see all the new orders in the system or something like that. So rather than having to manually kick it off and sit and wait for it to finish, you can actually schedule these reports to run in the background, and Saleslogix will actually alert you with a little pop-up in their little notification toolbar that the report is finished and ready to go. And so you can run these reports depending on how it's been set up. It still uses Crystal 11, by the way, so none of that's changed. But you have these various parameters like you have on your current reports, and you fill all that out. And I'm going to cancel this. I don't want to run it. But then you can see what reports are scheduled to run here. So if you do have any that you've already predefined schedules, you get to see in the Scheduled tab what has already been scheduled to run. And then the History tab is the finished report. So once scheduled reports are done and they've done their thing, you get the little pop-up over here that it's done, and then you can just come into the History area and open up the report without having to wait for it to run, because it's storing it as a PDF file. You can also store the report as an Excel file now. So it skips the step of opening it in the web viewer, and it actually just creates it in whatever format you told it you want it to be in. So you can see this one is actually an Excel workbook. So this is a phone list, and I told it I want to see it in Excel, and that's what it did. So I have Excel installed, of course, so I told it to open my little report, and it's going to bring it up in Excel for me. And you can bring it up in Word. You can even bring it up as an XML file. So there's several different report outputs that you can select depending on excuse me, on how you want the report presented to you. Okay, so that's the reports. They did a great job on that too. And I want to talk a little bit more about the integration. And we'll make these slides available to you. And of course, as I said, this is being recorded, so you'll see it there too. This is the new compatibility chart for version 8.1. And so they've added some 64-bit capabilities now for IE10. They've also added support for Firefox, Chrome, and Safari, and even Safari on a Mac. There are a lot of Mac users out there, and more every day in the business world. So you'll see that they've improved that. What they've really tried to work on in 8.1 is this whole concept of browser independence. It's been kind of a challenge for a lot of customers to get the right browser at the right level and the configuration just right so that it always works. That is a little bit of a challenge. They've made it a lot of strides in removing those dependencies on certain browsers and certain releases of browsers. So now, Saleslogix doesn't care anymore what your browser is. it runs just fine and is supported on all the 4 common browsers that are out there. And like I said, even Safari on a Mac, which I've used, and it works just great. Now, the one caveat to all this is dragging and dropping of Outlook emails and the mail merge engine is only compatible with the 32-bit version of IE. Not everybody uses the drag and drop functions or mail merging, but some do. Unfortunately, you have to use IE in a 32-bit mode in 8.1 for that to work, but virtually everything else, including the desktop integration engine, doesn't care. So all of that works just fine because we don't rely on the browser for any part of that whole brand new Outlook integration, which is really good stuff. So here's just a quick little chart about browser compatibilities in general. And as you can see with 8.1, we're compatible with IE 11, Chrome, don't care which version, Safari, don't care, and Firefox, don't care. I'm up to version 25 and it works, or I think maybe even 26 works great. Again, the only caveat is drag and drop and mail merging is IE 11 or IE 10. Okay. All right. So I don't need to talk about mobile, but they are actually improving some BlackBerry support. They were a little bit weak on some of the BlackBerry touchscreen devices, and with 8.1 and 3.02, they've actually improved that. And you can get, as you can see here, you can get 3.02, which has the improved BlackBerry support, for version 8. You don't have to jump all the way to 8.1 to get that.